these sort of competitors that you tell are mounting a more formidable challenge than they have been able to in the past, partly because of their position.
Head north on Handle Road toward Mount Snow Road. In half a mile, turn right to stay on Handle Road.
Movements in the
So this really big sort of seismic shift, what does this tell us about where the industry is heading?
The industry is heading, I mean, it's kind of obvious, I guess, but the industry is heading toward being much more consolidated and being more of a 3 or 4 horse race. I mean, it used to be you have Intel and then sort of a smattering of mid-sized and small companies. What we might see in the future, if some of these deals go ahead, and it should be noted that they're all pending regulatory approval, and that's not a certainty. I mean, major semiconductor deals have fallen apart in the recent past for geopolitical reasons. But if these things actually work out, we could see a situation where you have more of a Intel competing with.
Turn right to stay on Handle Road, then turn right onto North Access Road.
AMD and with NVIDIA.
Turn right onto North Access Road, then turn left onto Vermont 100 North.
There's, on a little bit more of an even footing, so it could result in an industry that's kind of less sort of Intel and then everybody else.
Turn left onto Vermont 100 North.
More of Intel and NVIDIA and AMD, and sort of depends on what happens, but maybe some other nexus of power in the industry.
Right, and if they do go through, my big question is, what kind of impact?
Continue on Vermont 100 North for 14 miles.
On consumers?
I mean, that really remains to be seen. That's sort of the effect on consumers probably won't be really evident for a number of years. I mean, obviously these things have to be approved by regulators. That's not going to happen for at least a year, probably 2 years before those decisions come down, depending on which deal we're talking about here. And then once that approval comes through, then we'll sort of start to see how these companies combine forces and what that really means for consumers. My guess is, on the average consumer level, you might not feel it directly day to day, but it might just mean that it becomes, for example, easier for people to move into cloud computing, and cloud computing becomes more performance is better, and upgrade cycles are faster potentially. I mean, these are just guesses, really. I mean, it sort of depends on how these companies manage through this and make these deals work. I mean, there's clearly a lot of risk in them, but we could see, as consumers, potentially benefits in the next sort of 3 to 5 year range, or that might not materialize too. It's not a sure thing for sure.
All right, our reporter Asa Fitch, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
That's it for Tech News Briefing this week. Production help came from Tremaine Aree, and Chris Sinsley is our supervising producer. Kateri Yoakum is the executive producer of Wall Street Journal Podcasts. I'm your host, Megan Llewellyn. If you like our show, please do rate and review us in your app store. It really does help. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Mistakes often cost time and money, and they can change your adventure in ways that you may not want. Of course, we all want adventure, but why not learn from others, from what they have done and the mistakes they have made, especially those with plenty of travel experience. That's what we're doing today. Mistakes made by motorcycle travelers and ways to avoid them through those mistakes. My name is Jim Martin. This is Adventure Rider Radio. Stay with us. We've got a good one for you. Now, Simon Exits, Boston Ben, Simon Baby,
Johnson Snow,
Simon Thomas,
Grant
Johnson,
Alice Jansen, and you're listening to Adventure Rider Radio.
Best Rest Products is the maker of the Cycle Pump, the best tire inflator for motorcyclists. It'll inflate your flat tire in less than 3 minutes. Made in the USA, comes with a lifetime warranty. They also distribute Gould Tech filters. CyclePump.com. And Green Chili Adventure Gear offers American-made, heavy-duty luggage systems for all types of motorcycles. You can turn any dry bag into luggage using the strapping system. And of course, Green Chili Adventure Gear is tested in extreme weather and terrain to withstand the abuse that adventure riding gives it. Tough, reliable gear. GreenChiliADV.com. Well, of course, there's a first time for everything, including motorcycle travel, and there's a lot to consider before heading out on the road. You worry about your bike, and you worry about your gear, and then you worry about your carnets, depending on where you're heading, your expenses, your fuel. There's just so much to take in. And novice travelers, well, they often learn through trial and error. They often get caught up on things that aren't important while ignoring or missing things that may be very important. And even seasoned motorcycle travelers can still make mistakes, but getting a heads up on common mistakes just might give you enough insight to avoid some of those mistakes yourself, making your trip much more rewarding and maybe avoiding some of that pain associated with learning. Shirley Hardy-Ricks, Brian Ricks, Graham Field, Grant Johnson, and Sam Manicom are all coming up. They're from our Raw crew, all very experienced travelers. They've got a lot of insight into common mistakes that are made while traveling by many motorcyclists, including themselves. Quickly, let's go around here. What's the top number one common mistake? And I'm sure everybody's going to say the same thing.
Too much stuff.
Yeah, overpacking.
Preparing. Yep, too much stuff.
Too much stuff, trying to do it all too quick. Actually, I must say, and I think we've done this before, I do now have a list. When I get back from a big trip, everything that comes out of the panniers, I make a note of every single thing that came out of it, and a little star next to it, whether it got used or not. But you see, now I do these little 2 and 3 day trips on the Thruxton off to Romania or Serbia or somewhere, and it's got such tiny panniers, and I learnt the hard way that now I take a spare inner tube and tyre levers and enough to at least change that. But I take so little because they are only a few day trips, and that's really wonderful to get that down. I mean, an SAS saying is that whether you're going away for 3 months or 3 days, pack for 3 days. Well, that's great if you're an SAS commander, but maybe not if you're an overland rider. But I have got a lot better at packing less, but still, I've got a long way to go. But as you do it, you sit there and it's like an insurance policy. You look at that part sitting in the shed, that spare inner tube, that extra tyre lever, that voltmeter, everything. Oh, I'll just put that in, And before you know it, your panniers are bulging, your bike's heavy, and you've lost all your dexterity and control because the thing's wallowing like a hippo on acid or something.
You never know what you're going to need. Do you not take your first aid kit because you didn't use it last time? Well, what if you do need it? Then you really, 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 really need it. So it's always a tough battle as to just how much is enough and how much is too much. And you have to think about how much do I need at the side of the road versus how much do I need that I could actually get in town when I finally get there, because you don't get something in town.
Next to overpacking, what do you think is one of the most common mistakes?
Going too fast and too long. And what I mean by that is, when we're all setting off on journeys, we're so enthusiastic, but until people become more experienced as overlanders, then they don't take the time out to chill and relax into the journey, and they miss too much. And I always think that the adventure starts as soon as you leave home. They're just going to happen straight away. As soon as you get down the end of your road, and that's it, the adventure's rolling. And people tend to get so excited about being on the trip that they blast the first days and don't see or do anything. All they do is get tired. And if people continue with doing that, then they start to put themselves at risk of making errors. If you don't allow yourself the time to stop and to relax and value the place, then the trip can turn into a battle, can't it? Those shorter days and holidays are so important, unless of course you're limited for time and then you want to get to a particular area where you want to spend the bulk of your time. But I think that travelling too fast and too long also doesn't allow you to get tuned into your own senses, because as soon as we break free from everyday life, we're demanding different things from our senses, and we need to allow them time to wake up and by really pushing and burning and going too fast and too long days and so on, we're not giving them a chance. And that means you're just not tuned into moments when things can go wrong quite so well. You're dulling your ability to think yourself out of situations where things might be going wrong. You know, for example, that strange vibration or a comment that somebody has made. Is that true? Is that likely to be dangerous, or is that an opportunity?
Is this something you've learned from experience, Sam? Did you sort of go through a period where you went, hang on a second, I'm doing this?
Oh, do you know, I still do it. A couple of years back, I was when I was in the States, I was given loads of tips by a friend, and he linked me up with a bunch of people, and he even worked out a route plan for me. And normally I just don't do that, but it felt like the right thing at the time to let this happen. But it turned out he must travel a lot faster than I do, and I really battled to keep up with the schedule that he'd given me. But because I'd never done this before, I thought, yeah, come on, just do it. See, it's a new adventure, a new start to the adventure. Have a go. But I got to the stage where I was tired, and where I rode through a day of just hissing rain to try and keep to this schedule, and all the time I'm riding thinking this is stupid. If you weren't trying to keep to this schedule, if you weren't trying to let this trend down, you would have pulled over and found somewhere to hold up until this rainstorm has just worn itself out. And by the time I made it to the friends that I was about to make, I was so tired. And that night when I was going to sleep, I was thinking, Sam, that was really stupid. It was almost like you put blinkers on your head, on either side of your eyes, and you didn't see anything to the side, and you just were so tuned into getting there and keeping up with the schedule. You just opened yourself up to risk.
You know, I saw a comment that somebody made on one of the other things we were talking about in another episode, and it's funny how people can have different ideas. His comment was on stopping to see, experience culture and see landscape and all that, and he said, to heck with all that. He said, I'm not into that. I'm just into the ride. That's what he's into. Riding distance, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, so everybody, I think what really, like, what it comes down to is, what you're saying, really in what you're saying, is knowing what you want. And I kind of think, Sam, you've said that before about travel, understanding what you want in advance before you leave out of the trip. Why are you doing it?
Oh, absolutely. I've got a friend who he's a world record breaker, and I said to him, but you don't see anything when you're traveling that fast. And he said, yeah, but Sam, that's not why I do it. Why I do it is because I love riding my bike. And I just want to get on the road, and I want to ride every day for as long as I can, and that's where I get my bus from. And I thought, yeah, okay, it's not me, but I understand it.
So it depends on what you want. I think when you're planning a trip, the biggest thing that we see all the time is that some people, the guy wants to do the big ride, and he just wants to ride and see how far he can go and see how much mileage he can put on. But he's neglected to realize that the wife maybe has a different idea. Or sometimes it's the other way around. I know some women who are just into the ride, and he's more interested in seeing what there is on the way. So for a couple, it's deciding and agreeing and understanding exactly what the other person with them actually wants and what they think a round the world, for instance, ride is. I mean, I've had couples that say, I want to do a round the world ride. She said, I want to do a round the world ride. They both have completely different ideas of what a round the world ride is, what they're going to do, how long it's going to take, and how much riding they're going to do, and what they're going to see. Totally different. So you really got to be careful and get that together.
Yeah, well, that brings up another one to mind. That the thing is, if you're looking to partner with somebody, so if you see somebody advertise, I'm doing this trip, I'm looking for somebody to ride with. That's another time where you want to make sure your goals are aligned.
Oh yeah.
I think that the biggest newbie mistake, other than overpacking, of course, is over-planning, overthinking the trip. You knock off work and you think, right, I've got a month or 6 months or 12 months or 6 weeks, so you've just got to get there and get moving and think like you're still working, and it's a completely different mindset. And I think once you get into the groove of it, it's okay. But at first, it needs to be a real conscious effort, I think, to slow down, enjoy what you're doing, and not get overwhelmed with the trip that you're doing. Just take it I guess a bit take it as it comes. Let it be a little bit organic, if that's not too corny a word. When we did our first trip, after about the first 3 weeks, I thought, my God, I'm never going to make it back to Australia because it's such a long way away. And we sat down and talked it through and worked out I really shouldn't be thinking about April next year. I should be thinking about Friday and where we might be on Friday and, what we want to see tomorrow, or what sort of place we're going to stay in, and just start taking it in little bits rather than trying to think, oh my God, we've got to ride from London to Australia. Are we ever going to get there?
Not looking after physical self. And what I mean is not taking out the time to eat and drink regularly, not taking the time out to keep clean. So in other words, people just don't learn the value of washing water and tea. I travelled for a couple of days with a guy in Africa, and he was so suspicious of local food that he survived on bread and peanut butter. He hadn't even, he wasn't even eating fruit. All these mangoes and guavas and bananas and pineapples and all of the rest of it. He didn't want to eat any of that stuff. He'd been literally surviving on bread, peanut butter and adrenaline. And of course adrenaline runs out after a while. So everything, he was just grumpy about everything. He was too tired to do more than what had to be done. He was travelling with no joy. And bumps in the road were always problems. And that's why I only travelled with him for 2 days, because I thought, I can't be around this guy. But if he'd been eating properly, he's expecting his body to do all sorts of things that you wouldn't normally expect it to do. A trip makes your body do stuff constantly, all day, every day. And you're on intake overload, aren't you? Challenges are coming at you from all over the place. And unless your body is being looked well after, you just don't cope well with this stuff. And I see it happen a lot.
The one that comes to my mind always, there's actually two. One of them is over-preparing before you even leave. I know one guy who spent 3 years and a ton of money preparing his bike. It was an R80 GS, and he rebuilt it from the ground up, and it was better than factory. 3 years of planning and preparation, and then he didn't go. Spent all his money.
And that's sort of along with what Shirley said, with although that's spending your budget before you leave, but what Shirley was saying about doing too much preparation, putting too much into the pre-trip.
Too much planning, too much preparation, too much time on the bike. It's all fixable. People are out there. I always tell people, one of my favorite phrases, I guess, is you're on a road, and at each end of the road there are people. That's why the road exists. Otherwise you wouldn't be on a road, because it wouldn't be there if there was no people at the end. And guess what? They're just like you. They need food, they need cereal in the morning, they need something for dinner, they need toothpaste. You can buy it all anywhere. There's no differences. It might be not the brand you want, but there'll be something that will do the job just fine. And living with the local stuff and eating and living the way they do is good for you. It's a good thing. So don't worry about it. You don't need all that much preparation. You can always stop, go to a hotel, and refigure and ship stuff in. Whatever. It's all doable. You don't need to prepare your brains out.
How do you guys feel about gear as far as buying gear? Like, just gear in general?
It's very easy to fall into the trap when you're in the research stages of thinking that you need all this stuff. I think good camping equipment, as we discussed before, does pay you back again and again and again to have a comfortable night's sleep. But a lot of the stuff, you have to remember, I always try to remember, people travelled years ago, before there were motorcycles, before there was Cinchillate, before there was GPS and phones, and it's possible. And it might even make it more enjoyable. It's very easy to fall into the trap of needing all that stuff, and it's also very easy to travel without it.
And if you get to the point where you really need it, buy it.
Yep.
They sell things outside of your home country.
Yeah, that's my point. And I see people getting absolutely anal about which is the best tent. Spend weeks discussing it on the forums and trying to figure out what's the best tent. Well, does it fit? Is it big enough? Is it good? Is the price reasonable? Fine. It doesn't have to be the perfect tent, because it's probably not going to finish the trip anyway, so you're probably going to want to replace it somewhere along the line, so don't sweat it. But always buy good stuff. Don't buy cheap, but you also at the same time you don't need to buy the very best. The very best is overkill. The cheap stuff is just not going to do a good job because it's cheap junk. Something in between, I always kind of go 60-70% kind of thing is my thinking, and that's kind of a sweet spot. Decent price, good quality, it'll do the job.
Yeah, I agree with that, Grant. I think you get stuff that works for you. It doesn't matter what the price is. If it works for you, that's fine. And you see people, I've got the latest and greatest, and they spend thousands and thousands of dollars on the best riding gear and all that sort of stuff. Well, if it keeps you warm and dry, what else do you need?
Good boots and good gloves. I don't reckon you should scrimp too much on boots or gloves, but waterproof gear. Someone said to me once, the best they'd ever ridden with were the things that ladies wore playing golf. They're called rainboot or something, and they were just overjackets and overpants. I now wear overpants that are made for hikers that I bought in a camping store in America, and they're awesome. And they were so much cheaper than buying something that had motorcycle written on the label.
Oh yes.
It really comes down to a personal thing, I think, doesn't it, for that? Because some people will buy the cheap rain suit that goes over their riding jacket, Graham, and other people will want to buy the latest, greatest Gore-Tex jacket.
And surely, Graham, don't you let anybody have a go at you about that. I wear my waterproofs over my jacket too.
Well, the other thing is as well, once you start getting good quality stuff, you start getting neurotic about it. I've got to a stage now where I've got some nice bikes and a nice car. When I had a old motorbike and an old beaten up van, I never worried about where I parked it or anything. And now all of a sudden you have to start thinking, oh, good Grant, I've got a story for you. Went to a little restaurant last night because we couldn't bother to cook in a little town in Bulgaria. Went to the restaurant. On the bit where you push your hand to open the door, there was a Horizons Unlimited sticker.
How glad to do that.
But anyway, so the point is, I was toying with putting one of mine underneath it, and I thought no. but the point is, though, we sat in the restaurant, and I had to sit so I could see where my car was parked because I was worried about the bloody Mustang. So the less stuff you've got that's worth, if you've got stuff that's not worth so much, if you've got a crappy little tent with just some dodgy camping equipment in it, you don't mind going off for a hike and leaving it out of sight because it's not that valuable to you. So the more money you spend on gear, the more protective you become over it, and probably the less adventurous you're going to be because of it.
Friends of mine travelling in South America, they had really top quality tents, and this happened to three sets of friends, and they all had the same make tent. And over a period of a year, they came back to the camping sites and found that their tents had gone.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point of getting paranoid with your stuff, and I think we can probably all relate to that with anything you have. I'm sure you wouldn't have to worry about your pickup truck, Ram, if you had to drive in that. You just park it and walk away from it. What about cash and credit cards? Some common mistakes there. We've sort of talked about pre-trip planning, and now I'm thinking you hit the road, the wheels are turning. What are the sort of things we're running into there? And I think cash and credit cards, that's got to be sort of the top of the list.
Not enough cash and one credit card. That's a big mistake.
You mean not enough cash in your reserves or not enough in your pocket?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. So you need to have enough.
In a quarter mile, turn right onto Vermont 30 South.
Cash in your pocket to take care of whatever you need at the side of the road, because the average person in the third world country doesn't take credit cards. You want to get a lift into town, you need cash. And only having one credit card.
Turn right onto Vermont 30 South.
Credit card doesn't work in the local bank machine, and trust me, that happens a lot. You need to have alternate credit cards. 2 or 3 credit cards even is a good idea.
Continue on Vermont 30 South for 1.5 miles.
I think a top tip is to try and find a way to travel with at least 2 weeks worth of funds in cash.
When I travel on my own, I'm pretty good at carrying enough water with me. I've generally got quite a bit of water, but as soon as I pair up with someone, firstly you're a bit more distracted because you've got that company, and secondly there's an element of assumption that the other person has done that, and found myself a few times in predicaments where neither one of us have got any water, and you can survive for quite a long time without anything, but you do need water. So it can be a pain carrying water because it's heavy and it's hard to find a location to put it on your bike. But while you're on that road that Grant tells you about, which people are going from A to B on, there might be quite a long gap before someone is going from A to B, and if you've just got your water, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, especially if you're broken down at the side of the road.
Yes.
Yes.
Water and a bit of shade. So you always carry your water bottles and your umbrella.
Yep, that's Ted Simon's recommendation. Always have an umbrella.
Yep, we take
There's
an
no
umbrella.
wrong.
Yeah.
Going back to cash though, Jim, one thing that I think people need to think about is where to put the cash. Because if you're taking a couple of $100 for emergencies, say, you're not going to have that in your wallet that you're going to open when you get out your 15 rubles to pay for some fuel.
In a quarter mile, turn left.
And you're not going to have it in the place that some dodgy person who goes straight for the tank bag thinks, aha, I've found this person's $200 cash.
Yeah, I mean, the trick is to spread
Turn left.
around, isn't it?
Where do you hide the money?
That's quite seriously, we can't tell you where we hide it, because then if someone sees us on the road, they'll go, I know where they're keeping their cash. When you think about it, there are plenty of places to hide cash, and the valuable thing that you should always have a few spare ones is little plastic Ziploc bags that you can put your cash in a little Ziploc bag, so if it happens to be somewhere that might get wet, you're not going to get it ruined. So those little Ziploc bags, you can tuck them into places and split, as Sam said, split your cash up, don't leave it all in one place. So if you lose something or get robbed, you're not going to lose the lot.
Well, there's always lots of places. If you use your imagination, and every bike is so different. There's lots of bikes have places that are really easy, and some bikes are really tough. Underneath the tank is obviously a good place, but the main one not to use is anywhere near the battery. So I know a couple who were in Africa and they were down to their last money, and they said, right, we'll get the money out, we'll spare money. And they pulled up the battery, and underneath the battery was where they put their money, and it was just black powder was all that was left. And it was in a Ziploc bag. And all they had was $1,000 worth of powder.
There are so many places on a motorcycle and your gear, and if you use your common sense and your imagination, you can find lots of different spots to tuck things away. And it's absolutely right, Shirley. Spread it out.
Yeah. A good spot is in your boots, especially if you've got an insole of some kind. Clear it underneath the insole. Who's going to look in your stinky boots, right?
Yeah, I
So
often do
it's a
that.
good place. Yeah. A little bit of money there, a little bit of money in your pants, and a little bit of money in something else, and in the lining of your helmet. There's lots of places you can stash.
Can I move us back to planning?
Please.
Just one of the things that always pops into my mind, and I think Shirley touched on this earlier on, is over planning. I met a guy not so long ago, and he'd prepped for 2 years for his trip. He'd been avidly following the CIA and the Foreign Office reports, and he learned so much about the things that could go wrong. He was absolutely paranoid by the time he started his journey, and I'm actually impressed that he even started his journey. He was incredibly wary of everyone and everything they did, so much so that he only interacted when he had to. Borders, police, hotels, and so on. And that wore him down. The fear that he'd built up within himself before he even left, it just shot the whole idea of trust until proved untrustworthy out of the window. And his trip was just fear every day and no fun. And I just thought, wow.
I think if you look at your government's Foreign Office website, I mean, they are so careful, because obviously they don't want anybody to say to them, hang on a minute, you told me that was safe. So they pretty much say everywhere is dangerous. I mean, you'd be a fool to go into your kitchen without company if you read their website.
Yep.
Ours used to say going to Paris was too dangerous because there were pickpockets. Well, wackos. There'd be no pickpockets in Australia, so you'd be safe here.
We initially started to work on a dollar figure a day and tried to work our budget that way, but I think it depends when you're travelling. For example, if you're in Norway, it's a bloody expensive country to get around and try and fuel your bike, feed yourself, and get yourself in bed for the night. But then if you go to India, it's as cheap as chips. So I think you really have to think seriously about where you're going.
I think the keys for somebody wanting to set their budget for the first time is work out what their priorities for the trip are, as in what sort of lifestyle do they want to have? Do they want to stay in nice hotels or camping sites and backpackers hostels? Do they want to go and see particularly spectacular things where they're going to have to pay a lot of money to see them? What sort of distance do they want to ride? How long do they actually want to stay out on the road for? And of course there's that old thing, how much beer do you want to drink? Because of course now it can be a budget breaker. But I think if people start working out what they want out of the trip and then start having a look at the individual countries to find out what the facts are as far as cost of living is concerned, with the internet it's so easy now, isn't it? You know, to look up a country and find out how much fuel's going to be. Well, once you start knowing those sorts of figures, because fuel in many places is a keen budget thing, then they can start working out what the budget's going to be. And I think it's also things like what bike you're riding, isn't it? Because some bikes are thirsty little beasts, yet other bikes, well, you know, you can do 100 miles and still not get the gauge on the fuel tank wobbling. I think for somebody who's also planning a trip, then it's learning how much visas are for individual countries for their own, their own nationality. Irish, for example, they can go into all sorts of places and pay buttons for a visa in comparison to Brits or Americans.
We're going to take just a quick break and we're going to be back in a few minutes. We got a lot more, so stay with us. Well, I'm sure just like you, I appreciate quality, especially with things that are important to me. And when it comes to riding, I want things that are quality. I don't want a lot of things, but the things that I do want, I want quality. Because I don't want to wonder if or when they're going to fail. Atlas Throttle Lock has nailed it. I mean, nailed it when it comes to quality. They have a stunningly designed throttle lock that fits any bike. You can easily switch it between bikes, so you don't have to let it go if you decide to sell your bike. The Atlas Throttle Lock is machined from metal. Like, it feels great, but more importantly, when you mount it on your bike, it works extremely well. It works so well that you'd swear that it was OEM, or maybe, like I keep saying, better than OEM. It's a work of art. It looks like something you see on a one-off, exclusive bike. You know, one of those really high-end bikes that only people with a lot of money buy. It's like that sort of quality. It's got two buttons on it, one for engage, one for disengage, and it works so smooth. It's really kind of changed the way I've used a throttle lock. I've always had throttle locks, but I used them intermittently, and I found them, a fiddle thing that you had to mess with all the time. This thing works so smooth. It's just one of those products that you buy, you put it on there, and you forget about it, other than you use it to enjoy the ride. Do yourself a favor. You got Christmas coming up. This is a small package. It can easily fit into your stocking and hardly be noticed. Treat yourself to something that you're going to enjoy each time you ride your bike, and you can appreciate the quality in this. AtlasThrottleLock.com. This company is owned, and the whole thing is designed by, owned, and run by motorcyclists, people just like you that have the same desire as you, quality parts for their bikes. AtlasThrottleLock.com is a website, and throw in there anytime you're dealing with them that you heard them on Adventure Rider Radio. AtlasThrottleLock.com. See and be seen. That's the motto at Cyclops Adventure Sports, a family-owned business of motorcycle riders that design and manufacture all kinds of lighting products for motorcycles, also ATVs, bicycles, and more. They have stunning auxiliary lights for the bike. They have CAN bus system application sets for BMWs and other kinds of bikes, LED headlight replacements, and these are beautifully made, and most importantly, super bright. Now, I can talk from experience because I've tried their products. Like their Evo Safety turn signal inserts, which you turn your turn signals into super bright driving lights in the front, as well as super bright turn signals, and on the back they become brake lights. I have them on my bike, as well as turn signals on the back. These are stunningly bright. When you step on the brakes on this now with my bike, I notice it commands attention that only LED can do, and only a super bright LED. And the thing is with this system is they've made them absolutely waterproof, like the inserts are waterproof because your signals are not waterproof. And that's one of those small things that make all the difference. That's quality for you. That's when you know the company really cares about their products. The website is CyclopsAdventuresports.com. Anytime you're dealing with them, throw in there that you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. CyclopsAdventuresports.com. You know, if you're riding on your stock pegs still, you're literally hindering your ability to ride. Adventure bikes need robust foot pegs to give the added leverage, control, and durability to make the bikes do the things that would kind of shock other riders. We do a lot with adventure bikes. Of course, they're designed to be adventure bikes, but they can't make everything great on the bike or it would cost a fortune to buy. And probably more importantly, they have no idea how you ride. Now, IMS Products has researched and designed a full line of foot pegs for adventure motorcycles that fit all riding styles, from their very large ADV1 and ADV2 pegs down to their core Enduro for those that are more technical riders and get into tighter places. The demands of the adventure rider are great, there's no doubt, but the customization is also equally important. All IMS foot pegs are made of cast-certified stainless steel. They're all made in the USA. They're all warranted for life. IMSproducts.com is the website, and anytime you're dealing with them, throw in there that you heard them on Adventure Rider Radio. IMSproducts.com.
When I'm planning a budget, I take into account a hard-learned lesson, and that is taking it very, very slowly and very gently for the first 6 weeks of a trip. Because when we're setting off on a trip, having been working and in real life in inverted commas, those first weeks we're still traveling with that real life mentality of get things done now, and yeah, okay, I'll buy a coffee that costs me £3, $4, whatever. And it's very easy to burn through a huge amount of money in those first 6 weeks by trying to keep up with the must-do-it-now pace. And I find that if I take it very slowly and very gently for those first 6 weeks, I don't cover necessarily an awful lot of ground, but it really helps me wind my neck in and change my mental attitude towards what I'm spending and how I'm spending it.
What about the budget making you paranoid? Because, Graham, you were saying that you really, really watched that, and it was a big part of what you were doing. And also, you mentioned about, if you got ripped off or something, you'd have to sort of lay low or watch your budget for the next couple of days. What about letting mistakes ruin your trip? You get ripped off, or I think, Sam, you had a camera stolen that was pretty devastating for you. What about those sorts of things? That's something that you can, you can sort of take to heart, where you probably shouldn't.
Well, maybe not ruin your trip, might ruin your day, maybe ruin a few days, but I don't think it's going to ruin a trip.
I was dogged for 2 days about losing that camera, and I mean really dogged. It wasn't so much the camera, it was the fact that it was day of film and there were 35 shots on that film of my bike in unusual places, upside in a ditch, a couple of Indian policemen sitting on it, all of those sorts of things, and I was really racked off at losing that film. By the time we'd gone through the next 2 days with, as far as the camera was concerned, I thought, well, somebody's going to feed his family with that, serves me right for being lazy with it. Right, what's next? You can't afford to think any way other than that. I mean, you end up trashing your trip. Things will go missing sooner or later, particularly if you're careless, and I was. Things break. Are you going to get really upset about it? Well, why? It's going to stop. It's going to get in the way of your adventure. You just become that much more matter-of-fact and philosophical about it.
With cameras, download your photos.
Yeah.
Or, well, in the film days, that it was a bit more problematic, of course, but just so you don't, if someone knocks off your camera, they're not knocking off your whole holiday.
That's the right attitude, Sam. I left a Leatherman at a service station in India somewhere. I'd been doing some running repairs, and the guy let me use his little workshop. And we rode for about 100 kilometres, which is a long way in India. And I realised I'd left the weatherman there, and you get a little bit off about that for a while.
In a quarter mile, turn left.
You think about it. This guy's got a really nice tool in his garage, and when you can, you just go and buy another one. That's okay. It's just put down to experience, and that's what it is.
Turn left.
It's an experience, and it also makes you realise how lucky you are to come from the country where you do, and to have the income possibilities that you do in comparison to the places where you're travelling.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right.
I want to throw out another newbie mistake that I made that I always remember is getting angry. I was in a border situation, and I think it wasn't Tanzania, because Tanzania was a daughter, but it was in that part of the world. Went into the border, and they gave me a piece of paper, and all these stamps had to be going on, and there's things coming from several directions. And at the end of it, the guy said, "Where's this piece of paper so you can leave?" And I said, "I don't have it. The last guy took it." He said, No, you must have this piece of paper. You must have this piece of paper. And I got pissed off. I was absolutely convinced that the last guy had taken it. So I kind of ranted and raved a little bit, and drove down the road. He said, "Okay, just go, crazy white man, just go." Got to the hotel that night, pulled out my wallet, and there it was. My wallet. You know how bad I felt? I was a complete idiot, stupid, arrogant, got angry, and I should have just stopped and slowed down. So, well, let me just check. And I didn't. Generally, I'm pretty good at borders, but this one time, I don't know, it was really hot, and I was tired and frustrated, and it taken a lot longer than I expected. Yeah, it definitely wasn't Tanzania, because Tanzania was about 10 minutes, and this border was like 3 hours. And it was just, you can't get angry. It's just not going to do you any good. All it's going to do is ruin your day, ruin their day, and you get nowhere. The angrier you get, the farther behind you get, and the more they're likely to say, "Well, I'm not going to give you what you want."
So I think actually it's a brilliant bit of verse. Easier said than done, I think.
Oh, God, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I'm generally pretty intent, but sometimes, every once in a while.
In a quarter mile, turn right.
I remember having a conversation with someone at the show, and he was telling me about border crossing, and he was telling me, he said, and I said to him, "No, you are not looking in my panniers." And I thought, "You bloody idiot, you know, and where did that get you?"
Turn right.
You've got to be competent, you've got to be submissive. And it's so important to remember that, because you'll never win with authority. It doesn't matter if you're in your own country and you've been pulled over by the police. The only way to win with authority is to be humble and subservient.
Calm, respectful.
Always smile.
I like that much better than subservient.
Always smile at the man with the AK-47 at the border. Always smile at the man who has the stamp that is going to get you into the country.
Shirley, I've got to tell you a story about that, and Birgit won't mind me saying this. We were going from Mozambique into Zimbabwe, and at the border, and Birgit's, a newbie motorcycle overlander. We've only been on the road for about 4 months by this time, and I've been dealing with border crossings because I've been through Africa before, etc., and she was looking after the bikes. But this time, she came into the office with me, got a start, and she was horrified. "What do you mean? You want our credit cards and you're going to take them out of the back? You could be doing anything with them out there." And that was it. I'll tell you what, we nearly got thrown out of Zimbabwe before we could even allow it in.
What about paperwork? Common mistakes.
Not being prepared, not having your paperwork ready. It's the biggest one, and not having enough photocopies.
Yeah, photocopies.
Oh, that's what, just before we get into that, that's what I was going to say, but surely you'd said something about photographs. I was going to say, backing everything up. I mean, Sam's issue there with the camera, that was different because it was filmed back in those days. Sorry, Sam, I don't mean to hate you. But nowadays, I mean,
I'm collecting my pension next year.
everything being digital, it's easy to back things up. We've talked about this before. Backing things up online, that goes through paperwork and everything to make sure you've got copies at various places. And we've been through this. We've talked about the different ways that you can back things up.
That's so important to back everything up. It's just common sense, and with the facilities there are around in these days, Jim, to back stuff up and to copy and so on. It's just daft not to. I'll leave a copy here, and I'll take a copy with me. If something goes wrong, and you'll just be able to pull this out and say, right, here we are. These are all the numbers. These are all the dates, etc., etc. And you've got the emergency phone numbers. How daft are you if you don't do something like that? It's simple.
I know what we did.
They put it online too.
What we did the other month when we were in India, because I was travelling with my girlfriend, is we took a second to photograph each other's passports and Indian visas. It took seconds to do. So now if we lose a phone and passports, we've both got each other's details on our phones. That was a very simple, quick thing to do.
Yep, absolutely. It goes along with simple things like when you're travelling with somebody else. Who carries the spare keys? Oh, you carry each other's spare keys. Yeah, I know you made that mistake.
And also with paperwork, checking your paperwork when you get it back to make sure that you've got everything you're supposed to before you walk away.
It is very easy, in the sheer relief of getting everything done, to walk away without taking the time to check that you have got all of the documents back again.
Way too easy.
Just take that few moments, rein yourself in, do it. My God, it saves a lot of grief later.
Any other paperwork mistakes anybody can think of, or things that you think are those common mistakes people make?
Well, you were saying about doing too much research and preparation, how daunting it was. When I was crossing from the Ukraine into Russia, and I had read so many nightmare stories about trying to get into Russia. And I was on this little ferry that was taking me across the water to Russia, and I was so scared. I just split up with a friend who I'd met, so I was single again we'd been riding buddies, and so once again I was just in my own company. I was on this ferry, I was going to Russia. It just seemed so daunting, so scary, so frightening. And I got to the Russian border, and I was given a form in Russian. And I thought, oh dear. And then this lady said, oh, English, gave me the form in English, and I was babysat. I walked from one place to the next, from the customs to the immigration to the insurance, and it was so easy, it was so painless, it was so wonderful. It was such a lovely introduction of something that I thought was going to be just nightmarish, turned out to be a wonderful experience. So that aspect of the paperwork was great, and that aspect of reading too much and being too put off it never occurred. It didn't happen.
Oh, you're so right. Allowing preconceived ideas to take over negative preconceived is so dangerous, isn't it? That's Chinese whispers. That's another perfect example, isn't it? You hear stories from other people. They're coming towards you, and you need to really be concerned about this road. There are massive potholes, and they're going to get shot at, and there are bandits around, and all of this sort of stuff. And well, their circumstances may have been completely different. Their experience, the weather they had, their health on the particular day, or whatever else it may be completely different to yours. When I was coming back from India, heading for Europe, in Pakistan, facing the section of road between Quetta and Taftan on the border with Iran, I heard so many stories about how dangerous this blooming road was across Balochistan, and I worked myself up into a right nervous state, even though I'd been on the road for 4 years by this time, because the scare stories were so bad. And when I rode it, I thought, oh, this bit gnarly. And that was it.
You were talking about the condition of the road.
The condition of the road and the risk factor and the speed bumps and people trying to rip them off. And
because I'm going to say those sorts of things, I mean, just because you made it through doesn't mean that everybody's going to make it through. You know what I mean? Because what I was going to say is sometimes ignoring local advice, I think, could be a problem too.
Oh, I think you should always listen. always listen, but then allow things yourself to keep things in perspective, and go out there with an open mind. So you pay attention, of course you do. That's common sense, isn't it? But when you're actually there, you don't allow those things to take you over and to fill you with so much dread and negativity that you don't enjoy it, or you end up doing stupid things because you've allowed yourself to get into that state. Go and experience it for yourself. Yeah.
A lot of it depends on your level of experience too. You could get somebody coming the other way and telling you it's a terrible road, and they've been riding for 3 months. They have no clue. You've been riding for 20 or 30 years, and it's so where's the problem?
Grant, I think that's exactly what was happening to me with this situation. People were just coming straight out of Europe. They've been through Turkey and Iran, and then all of a sudden they're confronted with a road that was gnarly. It wasn't hard, but it was gnarly, and so they were just full of wow about it.
Yeah, relative to a motorway in Europe, yes, it's gnarly, but relative to some of the back roads in India, so what?
Yeah, quite.
We were talking about paperwork. What about border crossings and currency? Are there some common mistakes made about currency? If you're to search for this online, there'll be people who will tell you, do your exchange, in particular for flying places, do your exchange at the airport. Other people say, don't, that's a fool's game because you're going to get dinged there on the exchange rate. What about those sorts of things, like obviously motorcycle specific?
But I've said this before, and we've done this many times when we come to a border. We make sure we know what the exchange rate is. And 9 times out of 10, the people that are exchanging monies at the border will give you a better rate than what you can get at a bank, and definitely better than anything you'll get at an airport. So you've got to know what you're facing, and you can only do that a day or two out from wherever you are, because they can fluctuate quite a bit in some of the lesser stable currency places. So yes, you have to research a little bit, but that's the only problem we've ever faced. I think, in one place, we got such a good exchange rate that the guy had actually came back to us and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir, I've made a terrible mistake," and he'd made a big mistake. So he did give him some of his money back.
Yeah, and I think you can easily get too concerned about it too, because as long as you have an idea in advance of what the official exchange rate is, the numbers that they give you are either seem reasonable or they're not. And I know people who get absolutely crazy about 1%. I don't care about 1%. And you can spend hours worrying about it and stressing about it, but 1% or 2% really doesn't matter in the long run. Do the job, get your money, and off you go. Don't get too stressed up about it.
And anyway, you're probably only going to change a small amount of gold, because you're probably going to hit an ATM when you get into the bigger town anyway. So, maybe you're doing $50 worth, and that 1 or 2% is so small, it's just not worth sweating it.
Exactly.
I think the same about airports too. I mean, you fly in some countries and you haven't managed to get currency beforehand because for that particular currency it's just not available anywhere.
Yeah.
And so, well, yeah, okay. What are you going to do? Walk out of the airport with no money at all, except for your own currency? No, of course not. You just take whatever you can get. And quite often in airports, there's 3 or 4 foreign exchanges, and frequently they've got different rates. So just have a wander around. Take it easy. Take a look-see.
Yeah, I flew into Indonesia this last year, and I had you can't get Indonesian currency anywhere except in Indonesia. And walking through the airport, there's 4 or 5 vendors. One of them was really busy, the rest were all really quiet. Well, I knew where I wanted to go. I wanted to go to the really busy one because that was going to be the best rate. On the other hand, I asked the other guys what was the rate, and the difference was so tiny. I forget it. I'm not going to wait half an hour in line for 0.5%. Forget it. You got my business. Just did it.
Yeah, you see it's a convenience fee.
Yes, absolutely.
What about bank cards with fees?
That is a trap for young players in this country. Our banks charge extraordinary rates for you to use your credit card overseas. You really need to be aware of how much they charge for certain cards. Like if you've got a debit card and then you end up using your credit card at a bank machine, they'll charge you cash advance, which is a hideous charge. So you really do need to be aware of what your banks charge before you go away and start using cards willy-nilly.
How about wrong place or wrong direction for weather pattern?
You certainly don't want to be in India in the monsoon, do you?
Yeah, I mean, do you think is that a common mistake? Is that something you guys have heard from other travelers that I was going here? Because I know I've heard it a few times. You know, people are trying to cross the mountains and they find that it's the wrong season.
Yeah, we had a friend do that, try and cross the Mountain Balkans, I think it was, in the snow on his bike, and he's got 2 feet of snow. He's not going anywhere. And you've heard us talk about this before. Our first trip, we reversed the trip over the weather pattern, and I'm so glad we did. And anytime anyone talks to us about travelling from Australia to Europe or whatever, I tell them that story, and it's the first thing they do. And you don't have to do a lot of research. You just have to know when the seasons are in different parts of the world. That's it. And it's the same if you're travelling from Ushuaia to Alaska. You look at the weather patterns there, and you can do the whole trip. You won't get stuck.
I think the newbie mistake would be simply just assuming that because it's nice weather here, it's going to be nice weather there. Well, I can tell you that June in Ushuaia is not nice.
I can remember having someone out on the trip.
In a quarter mile, turn left onto Vermont 11 East Pleasant Street.
From a warm place, and they wanted to go paddling here on the coast, and they wanted to wear their bathing suit. And I had to tell them that there's no way you can paddle in a bathing suit on the coast here, and it was quite their deal. Actually, I had to.
Turn left onto Vermont 11 East Pleasant Street.
Refused to take her unless she was going to buy clothing, but she was very angry.
Continue on Vermont 11 East for 7 miles.
Until she got involved and realized that, it's not quite so.
Oh, yeah. Even in the middle of summer, it's not warm. And I always know, like when I go off on a flight to somewhere else when I'm going to ride, I really have to pay attention to the weather forecast for that place for a few days beforehand, because otherwise my decision on what to take is affected by what I wore today and yesterday and the day before, and what I think I would wear tomorrow here. Because my mind is not able to comprehend that massive change in hemispheres, for instance. It's just
I find it very hard to pack. I find it very hard to pack for anything other than the weather that I'm packing in.
Exactly. Yeah. Your mind just does not work on a different climate for packing. You just can't think that way. I don't know what it is.
But that's what the woman I told you about. That's what she said too. She said the same thing. Is that she was coming from a warm place and she just couldn't seem to get her head around it. Obsessive photography. That can be a mistake for sure.
Yeah. I read a review on that, exactly that, the other day, and basically the thought was that they had done some testing with students doing photography classes and various things, and they've done some specific A/B testing and the whole thing, and they came to the conclusion that those who took a very few pictures remembered better what they saw a few days later than those who took a lot of pictures.
Yeah, but I think if they dug further to that, those who took few pictures had far fewer followers than those who took more pictures.
Yes. You're absolutely right.
I last year when I went to South Africa, or went to Africa and did a safari, and had my lovely camera with me, got some fantastic photos of lions and cheetahs and hippos, and it was great, and I enjoyed the photographic aspect of it, and I do look at those photos. They come up on the laptop, but should I ever do another safari, I'm not taking my camera. I'm going to sit there smugly, maybe binoculars, and watch what's happening and not watch it through the lens, because I think that's a wonderful way to experience it. There's something lovely about being in the moment instead of looking at apertures and ISOs and sorting everything. Just being in the moment. There's a lot to be said for that.
Yep, I don't disagree at all. And I'm a photographer.
Without me going into too many of my stories here, that's one thing that I used to tell people about with wildlife viewing when we're heading heading out because we'd see whales, and I used to tell them, you just want to consider how much time you're going to be spending looking through your camera, because that's how you're going to remember this experience. And all you remember is that really narrow view of you racing around trying to get that thing in your viewfinder instead of just sitting back. So I tell people, maybe take some shots. You might want to consider just taking this whole thing in, and then go buy a photo, because there's tons of photos that are available to get.
Do you guys remember the old phrase, or the old saying, snapshots?
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Big time photographers used to look down their noses at anybody who took snapshots, but it's so easy to arrive in an environment that's really interesting, pull the camera up, especially if you know a little bit about what you're doing with taking a picture. Take a quick picture and then sit back and enjoy. That means that you've got the double whammy. You've got benefits of both.
How about cultural insensitivity? I know we've talked about that before. That could be I don't know if that's a newbie mistake. Would it be a newbie mistake, or is that a personality thing?
That's a clueless thing.
Yeah, clueless thing.
Yeah, you get educated. I think that's one of the advantages of traveling overland, is that you do get educated as you go. You are slowly indoctrinated into other ways of doing things and other ways of thinking, and that's okay. I think it's the really clueless ones are the ones that are dropped in from the sky. That's where there's a real problem when you really see it. But I don't think overlanders generally are that bad. But some of them, yeah, personality, as Shirley says, yeah, some people just are plain clueless, and that's all there is to it. Sad.
There's a thing in Southeast Asia, I'm not sure if it's a Buddhist thing, but it's definitely something that occurs in Southeast Asia, and it is considered rude to show the soles of your feet. So that if you're sitting in a position opposite someone and you've got your feet on a table or a stool, barefooted, and your soles of your feet showing, that's considered offensive. And it's strange, because I've kind of taken that with me, because if I'm now in a situation where I'm sitting, drinking beer somewhere, the soles of their feet are right in my eye line, well, that's really rude.
I find it quite interesting to learn about all of the different the cultural habits and so on. It's like Vietnam. You never touch somebody on the shoulder, because if you in Vietnamese culture, the genie lives on the shoulder, and if you touch them on the shoulder, you knock it off, and that's just devastating to somebody there. And I find all this sort of stuff really fascinating. Where did these things come from? That's part of the joy of travel, isn't it?
That's what it's all about.
What about getting directions? What kind of mistakes do you find that when it comes to getting directions?
Asking, is this the way to, and pointing.
Yes, exactly. Don't do that.
Yeah, we've done that one. Is this the road to Mumbai? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. I always remember the one I
where
learned.
does this road go to?
Yes. Then how many more people do you guys ask to confirm?
Depends on the country.
Every time you stop.
Every time you stop, yes. Yeah, I remember the one in South America where we asked, is this the road, or what's the road to Cusco, I think it was, and we were way up in the mountains somewhere, and the guy pointed that way, and I knew Cusco was north, and this guy was pointing south, and I said, what the heck? Why? There's no way it's south. So we had a little discussion, and eventually it worked out that that's the road that the bus takes to go to Cusco. It continues to go south, hangs a left, goes into some mountains, and turns left, and eventually ends up in Cusco. But the road to Cusco is south. Okay, he only knows how to get there on the bus. So keep that in mind.
Any other, you guys? Have you got anything else that you've thought of for common mistakes? Maybe something to do with bike service?
Not. That would be a mistake. Look after it.
Mm-hmm.
I see most of the mistakes I see with bike servicing is not doing enough, not doing it regularly enough. Most people are used to servicing their bike every 6 months. On the road, it's once a month.
And every day you ride a gnarly road,
Every day.
set camp, put the kettle on, and start checking your bike over.
Sam Manicom, Brian Ricks, Shirley Hardy Ricks, Graham Field, and Grant Johnson, and myself. You can hear all of them each month on our other show called Adventure Rider Radio Raw. Raw is a separate feed, so you'll need to subscribe separately wherever you find.
In a quarter mile, turn right onto Park Street.
Podcasts, and we have dedicated pages on each of them on our website and the whole Raw scene. If you're curious about it, drop by Adventure Rider.
Turn right onto Park Street.
.com/raw. Okay, I just want to remind you that this episode has been brought to you by
In a quarter mile, turn right onto Union Street.
Adventure Gear, Green Chili, ADV.com, Motobreeze Chain Oiler at Motobreeze.com, and the Best Rest Products at CyclePump.com. And we'd really appreciate if anytime you're dealing with these companies, anytime email or otherwise, let them know you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. Up another episode of Adventure Rider Radio, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as we did making it. Special thanks to our producer.
Turn right onto Union Street.
Martin, and to you, the listener, thank you very much for being a part of this. Don't forget we have another show called ARR Raw comes out.
In a quarter mile, turn left onto Grove Street.
It's Roundtable Talks about motorcycle travel. It's quite popular, and I think you're going to enjoy it if you enjoy Adventure Rider Radio. It's a separate feed. You need to subscribe separately. Anywhere you find podcasts, you can find Adventure Rider Radio and Adventure Rider Radio Raw. Now, if you're not supporting the show already, we have built it on a model of advertising and listener support. We would love to get your support for the show. Drop by AdventureRiderRadio.com, click on support, and see what we've got. Anything $10 or more, get you a sticker sent at you for your pannier, your bike, your toolbox, wherever you want to put it, maybe somebody else's place, if you want to stick it there to show that you've been there. And anything $50 or more gets you a shout out on Raw, and we would love to get you as a monthly supporter on
Turn left onto Grove Street.
Trim account. We would love to get your support there. So anyway, drop by, check it out. We'd really appreciate that. My name's Jim Martin. Thank you.
In 1,000 feet, slight right onto Clinton Street, Mineral Street.
Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next week.
Hi, this is Mary McGee, and you are listening to Adventure Rider Radio.
Slight right onto Clinton Street, Mineral Street, then turn right onto Clinton Street. Turn right onto Clinton Street.
My employees just got iPhone 12 on Verizon 5G.
In a quarter mile, your destination will be on the right.
5G business has been waiting for. We download huge files on the go and use multicam video conferencing. Plus, with the coverage of 5G nationwide and in more cities, ultra-wideband. It's 5G from the network businesses rely on.
Switch to Verizon and get iPhone 12 64 gig on us when you trade in a select device and transfer your number. 5G nationwide available in over 1800 cities. $799.99 device payment purchase with the line required. Credits of $250 and up to $550. Taxes, fees, and terms apply. Limited time offer.
Your destination is on the right.